of what I'm doing, and I've been doing it for so long. I'm just so comfortable. So you guys and your questions are actually rattling my cage a little bit, which is good. Good. Gives me mental exercise. All right. What we're going to do now is look closer at triggers. Trigger programs are probably when I talk about DB heavy lifting, you've got to try, when you're modernizing, you've got to try and let the database do as much heavy lifting as possible, i.e. take away some of the tedious and important stuff out of the applications and get them to be done by the database. And the trigger program environment allows you to do the most heavy lifting around the database, and it's all automatic. So I just wanted to show you this picture again to remind you of what we actually talked about. The before trigger, insert, delete, and update. One or more trigger programs can be attached to one or more of those events. And the same trigger program I just said can be attached to multiple different files as well. So you can really mix and match it. I do ask you, please, to discuss this between yourselves and make some sort of a policy decision about how you are going to handle it so you don't go crazy. Because you can complicate your life to no end by just going a little overboard. Before triggers, data validation, program access check, default provision, relationship checking, etc., etc., etc. For after events, insert, delete, update, and read. Data sync, summary maintenance, job submission, audit, data collection, read suppression, etc., etc., etc. You can do anything that you like in the triggers. And this is where most of the heavy lifting will get done in a database. A lot of before triggers and a lot of after triggers. Now, you did ask me the question and you pointed out that you have a problem because you've got a lot of programs accessing the same file, and a trigger that sends back an escape message is going to break your programs. Okay. I've got a solution for that, and I will pass you through it, but just bear with me. We're going to look at a standard trigger to begin with. Okay. So we're going to review conventional trigger program code and how you create it. So let's come here, and we are going to go into my environment, my ABC train environment, and I'm going to create a trigger program on prod.ord. Now, here, when I want to create a trigger, I use this option and I double click a trigger. Now, it comes up with this default set of parameters because that's how AO thinks. It always shows up a before insert to start with, and it defaults the trigger name to the file name underbar before insert 00. I don't go longer than that, although you can if you want to. It's just, this tells me that this is a before insert trigger on that file, and it is the first of possibly 99. In library ABC train, the program name is also the file name, plus a B, say it's a before trigger, and it's a 0, which to say it's the first before trigger program. So those are the conventions that I use. Now, I noticed, Joel, when you put the after triggers on, your names are a bit longer. The problem with that is, I'll show you a bit later, but you can't see them on the screen. So the shorter you make them, the more compact you make them, you see more of them. Anyway, this allow repeated update. I've got to try and explain this one, and it's very difficult to do. this, that they've chosen to describe this particular parameter in a weird way. The actual description, if you look at the manual, says allow repeated change. Now, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is, are you going to allow this trigger to change the contents of the file that it's dealing with, the contents of the record that it's dealing with? I.e., do you want this trigger to be able to manipulate the data that comes from the client to the trigger? Do you want to allow the trigger to change things? And 99 times out of 100, for a bit4 trigger, the answer to that is yes. It allows you to add user IDs to the record. It allows you to create and change date timestamps. It allows you to set default values if they haven't been supplied. It allows you to make sure that the client is not trying to change your customer number, etc., etc. So, yes. And of course, we want to attach it as an enabled trigger. So in AO, you create a new trigger. Now, I don't need to change anything here, so I'm just going to hit F3 save. Now, what AO does, because this is definitely part of the database, AO checks to see whether there's a trigger program that exists already in that library, in that schema. And if there isn't, it offers you the option to create the trigger template. So you can double click on here and you can select one of the trigger templates that are available. Now I'm going to take the simple one because the other two we will talk about later. So I've said, all right, I want to use that template for this trigger. So I say F6 continue. And it says the compilation failed. It attempts to compile the trigger, but 99 times out of 100, it will always fail, and I'll show you why. But you can still say, all right, I will cancel that, get back to this, and you will see it's added the trigger entry to the AO database. And at the same time, I will show you it has work OBJPD interface ABC. If you look at the file, you will see it hasn't added the trigger to the file itself. That's because the trigger program doesn't exist. And therefore, it can't add the trigger to the file. So what we do now I've got to try and find the code that trigger belongs to, which I will get up on the screen right now. But the trigger program was actually generated. There it is there. Just going to make this a bit bigger. Okay, so this is the trigger that was generated by the template. Now, again, you're going to have to look at your trigger template, and you're possibly going to have to change a few things. One of them being the ERH here. You must change that to ERR if you want to use it in your environment. But it gives you all the necessary bits and pieces for the trigger. There's the parameter pointer. We discussed that yesterday, Tuesday, I think. There's the parameter list. And remember, there's the old set of offsets, old offsets, and the new offsets. there. I've got an error 03, 5, 6, 10, and 11. And in the template I've got these spread out instead of using the copybook that's related to it. You can put the copybook in, it's part of the template. Right, let's have a look at some of what actually happens. I've got a trigger name. It builds in the trigger name because I use that in messages to tell you in a message which trigger is giving you problems. There's the new record pointer, there's the old record pointer. And there's the new record and the old record. And notice they are based on the new record pointer and the old record pointer. They are both qualified, so we have no problems. I also have the null byte map and the null byte map pointers and the null byte map indicators. I have those also defined. And 35, there is one null byte map indicator for each of the fields in the file. So a null byte indicator is one per field in the file. So there are 35 fields in that file. There's the message data, which is 20 bytes, but you can make that whatever you like. Error indicator, a work string, and a null indicator. Those are just standard stuff that is needed. Here we get to the actual trigger program itself. Now, remember, as I said, all trigger programs receive exactly the same parameter list. P, which is like the data structure P1, which is this one up here. And PL, which is the length of the parameter list. Notice this says option var size because, in fact, P can be of different lengths. So, sorry, I'm going to just turn this on for the moment. Right. The first thing the trigger program does, remember, the trigger program, a before trigger program like this one, is called by the RDBMS when an insert, update, delete is initiated by the IO server or the client, one or the other. It resets its error indicator because it starts off with no errors, and then it sets the PP, which is the parameter pointer, to the address of P. There's P. So it sets the parameter pointer to the address of P. As a result, it overlays P1, which is based on PP. It overlays that on top of P. Are you with me on that one, guys? Yeah. Are you getting the hang of these pointers? Because when you get into this particular area, pointers become so important. You can't survive without them. So I also, if you've noticed, I will then take NP, which is the pointer to the new record, and I will take PP plus P1 new offset, i.e. I will add the new offset that I've been given in my P1 parameter list to the beginning of the parameter list, which is PP, and I will set the new pointer to be equal to PP plus the offset to the new record. The null byte map does exactly the same, and then the old pointer is PP plus the old offset, and the old null byte map is exactly the same. Are there any questions there? So what I'm doing is this new record here, N, which is based on NP, and has a name that looks like prod ord and is qualified, that data structure, that's a data structure. It overlays a space, a place, PP plus the offset provided by the parameter list. Are you with me or not? Having done that, I have got N, which is the new record, and O, which is the old record. However, of course, I may not have both. If it's an insert, I will only have a new record. If it's an update, I'll have both. If it's a delete, I'll only have an old record. But I don't need to worry about that, because when I get to here, I decide what I'm going to do. If the event is a 1, it's an insert. If it's a 2, it's a delete. And if it's a 3, it's an update. So by checking the event, I can decide what called this trigger. What event was it that created this call to this trigger program? And I will execute, insert, a delete, or an update procedure accordingly. Right, let's have a look. The way this is designed is, after quite a lot of experimentation and backwards and forwards, I create an insert routine because the insert routine calls a validate routine. But there may be some things that I want to do before I validate. And so I would insert them there. I would insert anything that I want the trigger to do before I go to the validation. I will insert in that position. Now, there's a specific one that I always put in my update. PRODORD, full stop. Prod, sorry, prod ord. No, it's not. NP dot. Sorry, not. I'm losing it. It's not NP dot. It's N dot. That's the qualification. In fact, N dot. Why can't I? It should show me. Of course, I know what's happened. I haven't got the library. No com. It was no com, wasn't it? That was the.
Could it be capital N?
It doesn't matter, actually. RPG capitalizes everything when it compiles. Everything. So it doesn't matter. I just make capitals and lowercase to make it more readable. All field names are capitals as far as I'm concerned. Now, this I'm going to do in update. You see what I've done there? I don't want anybody to be able to change the product number or the no-com, whatever. That's the key. Okay? I don't want them to be able to change that by update. You follow me?
Yep.
Therefore, if an update is called, the first thing I do before I validate it is I move the old value back to the new value. So no client could ever change that. It's put in there by the IO server on an insert, but on an update, doesn't matter what you put in there, the trigger will not allow it to change. It's one simple thing. Right. The delete, again, you don't need to validate a delete, so there's no call to the validate routine, but you might want to put stuff into the before trigger before doing a delete action. Right. So that is simple. There's occasionally a need to put something into the inserts before validation and to the updates and so on and so forth. So that's the structure there. Now we come to the validate routine. And the way the template works is it creates a procedure for every single field in the file. It's a procedure. It's preceded by an dollar sign. It's got the record name, and it's a simple call to a simple procedure. It'll call this procedure all the way through. Now, it's simple. If you don't want to validate a field, you just comment out one of these lines. If you don't want to validate it, it's that simple. Right, so what it does is it comes down here and it validates each and every field in the file that you wanted to validate. Now, I'd like some input from somebody to tell me what validation would division need?
Division must be
It to be in
present
the
into
division.
the division table.
It must be in the division table. Right. So there's a table with division names, numbers in it. I'm going to take that out. Can anybody tell me why?
Because it can be a constraint.
That's it. Exactly. It can be a constraint. In fact, it will be, by the time we finished, it will be a constraint. Because that's the part 3 of the heavy lifting that the database does, is the constraints. So I don't have to validate something that is validated by constraint. So I can take that out. You have to, and this you have to do, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I can't do it. You've got to know your data, you've got to know your database, and you've got to go through all of these things, and you've got to design validations. And you need to have them as tight as possible to make sure that everything that could go wrong gets caught here. It's hard to begin with. I would suggest you go look at some of your code that does the order entry or the entry of this thing and see what validations are done. But you need to examine each one of these fields separately and try and decide what. I would imagine group has got a master file as well. Am I correct?
I don't think so, no.
Oh, okay. So there might be a validation there. Anyway, you've got to go through these. Record code might have certain values. No com. Do I need to validate no com? Yes,
No.
Why not?
No. Well, validation, no, because it depends.
Can it be 0?
It cannot be 0.
Right. So there's your validation. What happens?
But there's a lot of cross-file validation. I mean, sometime. Okay, the content of that field depends on other files, depends on the situation, and
okay,
yeah, but I see the point. It's
you see where I'm going with this. That's the point.
yeah.
If this was a numeric key assigned by the IO server, I wouldn't bother to validate it, because the IO server will put a 1 in if there's nothing there, and thereafter it will add 1. And I'm making sure by doing that that the client can't change it. So I'm happy. I wouldn't validate that particular no-com. But you've got to think of all the possibilities. Remember, in the trigger program, I can call another IO server. I can read a record from another file. I can check that this file, this record is on that file, and this record is on that file, and A and B from those 2 records are equal. If that's a valid condition, that's what you can check. You use the IO servers in the trigger programs to call other files to check relationships or anything else.
No, actually, all of the validation are within 1 or 2 programs. So we just have to see if they can belong into the before trigger.
Yeah, well, you can move them into the before trigger. That's no problem. It would be better to have them in the before trigger, because then they're not in 1 or 2 programs, they're in 1 program.
Yeah.
But you must also check to make sure that you're actually doing all the validations you need to do. Okay. You might find that some validations done in some programs, they don't validate something because they make an assumption that it will always be right. I've seen that. So you've got to make sure that you're doing all the necessary validations. Right. Each one of these procedures is a single validation, and then the template generates the procedure for each one. Now, what the template does is it uses the default value for the field to do the check. That's why it didn't compile, because somewhere down here, one of these, there's a on error condition, there's something not quite. Oh, this is the reason why it didn't compile. Your French apostrophe, you need another one in there. Otherwise, it doesn't. That's the name of the field.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to go through, and everywhere where you see this thing, you're going to have to. Anyway, that's beside the point. That would have caused compile errors all over the place. There's another one. And I tend to use the validate. And you'll find, and you can double up on each one of those, and so on. All right, but now this is where you write the validation code for a field. Now remember, this is a small, it says, if it's a 0, turn on the error indicator and issue a message describing the error. Notice this is an error 10, which is a diagnostic. It's a diagnostic error. It's not an escape message, it's a diagnostic, so it's informational. And what the golden rule about triggers is you should try and validate as much of the record as possible before returning the escape message. Try and validate as much as possible, because I don't know whether you've ever come across an app which you type a whole string of data into the thing and you hit the button and it says the first one's in error. So you fix that first one and then you push a button and it says this one's in error. And you fix that and hit the enter key and it says this one. Have you ever come across anything like that? It's infuriating. So what I like to do is I like to put out diagnostic messages for as many of the errors as I can find right up front, because all those diagnostic messages will be sent back to the client and can be displayed for the user to see what all the errors are before he tries to re-enter it again. Okay. Does that make sense? So you build up your validations where you need to, or you oh boy, there's a lot of it. Or
Yeah,
you
it's a
comment
big
out
file.
the ones that you don't. Hey?
It's a big
Sorry?
file.
Yeah. Now, when we start talking normalization, you're going to have problems, but we won't do that just yet. Okay, let's see if I can compile it now. Yes, it's compiled. Wonderful. Exactly what I wanted to happen. So that is what a trigger program and the template will throw out. Remember, the template works on the file. It gives you a list, it gives you a structure, but it cannot put in the actual validation code.
Then we can initialize date, timestamp within the date
Yes,
entry and
you
everything
can.
like that. Yeah.
Have you
At the
got
same
a
class as you
have
define
you
the
got a
new
field
compound.
here? Have you got a field here that's the user ID or a date timestamp?
Yeah, I think maybe it will be DT, not date production, but DT entry maybe.
Because
the last one, you know,
that one there.
No, the previous one, DT NTR.
Oh, that one.
I think
That's
I
the
think
date.
me.
That's the date of entry. Okay. Let's just assume it is. It doesn't have to be.
For example,
Yeah,
then
for example.
could
So this
initialize
date of
one.
entry, Control F, next. There it is there. I don't have to do this. I can simply say, in fact, I don't have to do that either. I can take this if out because it doesn't need the if. I can say date entry percentage date that's all I need to do.
Yeah.
Or is it? No, that's not what it is. Shall I tell you why?
You know, this is a 8-digit date.
Okay,
It's not a real date.
I use the system,
Field.
the date times as per the new database. You would have to code in something there.
Yeah,
It would
yeah.
be
It was,
but you
as an
don't, sorry,
example.
I made a mistake. I made a mistake. Can't do it there. Because what about the update?
It should be at the same place as you put
You've got to go
new,
up.
I guess old is
You've got to go up here and you go to, oh, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've got to go up to the insert there. And that's where you put it in.
Yeah.
So that it inserts it there. The in DTE in ER, something like that equals. I'm going to use my similar thing like that. So you would put it there before the validation. Okay. Let's just make that a capital. And then here, comment it out. Because you actually don't need to do that validation. So there are a lot of things. You can do the same with user. If you want to have a date, the last change date, you put that in here. Where there's an update, you put it in there. You know, so you have to use this as a skeleton for building your validation for that file. Now, I'm going to ask you nicely to see if you can do some of it for next week so we can have a look at it. going to compile this because the next step is I'm going to debug this. You see what it threw out at me? Oh dear.
Because this
Yeah, I know.
field is not a date field.
type
Yeah,
field.
it's a numeric 8-0 field.
Okay. How do you fill it in? What command do you use to fill it in?
Not a command. Just we add star update star date star
date.
DETA date. For example,
DAT like
DE. Yeah, not the bracket, only
just
date,
like that.
like that. Yeah.
Really? It worked. Compiled it. Okay, so that's wonderful. That's done that exercise. So let's have a look and see what happens. We now, if you look here at this screen here, you will see that that trigger is still there, but it is blue. So I want to see why it's blue. And you'll see it says the trigger definitions don't correspond. That's because it didn't add it to the. So what I do here is I go to the trigger and I save it. So on green, it means that this trigger has now, AO has attached this trigger to that file. All right. Now, typically, if you ever have an insert trigger with validations in it, you will also have the same trigger for updates. So we will add the same trigger, double click on there to get it to update. You will notice some of these values have changed. Update condition, always or only on change. It's the same program. It's the same program name. Same program, different trigger name. This update condition always asks, do you want to call this trigger every time there's an update on this file, or only when something has changed in the record? Now, I generally do that so that it doesn't do a trigger call if no change was made to the record. But sometimes you want it to be called always, because no matter whether the change was made or not, you might want to, I don't know, update the last seen date or something. You know what I mean? So you can choose whether you want that to happen. By making it change, I don't know whether it makes any performance difference at all, because you hardly ever will call this trigger if a change is not underway. So that's why the default is always. Okay, so we can save that. Notice that it did not ask me to create a trigger program, because it found there was one there already, and I refresh, it's added the second trigger program. Now, just to prove the point,
I didn't know we were able to to have only one program and two triggers.
Same program, one attached to the before insert and one attached. Obviously, you have to code for those eventualities in that program. But generally speaking, the insert and the update validations are the same. Therefore, it makes no sense to put a separate program in there. Right, let's have a look at the file, display the triggers. Now you can see that the triggers have been added to that file definition. by AO. AO's done that. And they are enabled operative insert before, enabled operative insert before. So we now have triggers on that file. Wonderful stuff.
Right.
Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to back out of here. I'm going to go to a command line. I'm going to add library list entry. EDT LIBL.
My goodness, ma'am. What could it be? Hey, Caddy, what could it be?
But I'm putting ABC train up the top of the library list. And I'm going to start a debug on prod ord. Starting a debug on prod ord. Prod 000 rather. Let's service entry point. Okay. And then I'm going to call PROD000. And you will see it's hanging on a system actor. Get that out the way. And we will see here it is now in the debug state. And it's dropped into prod 000 there. Now, I'm not going to worry about this because we've been through this one. What I'm looking at is, sorry. I have to. It's finished. I've got to close the debug. I apologize. I made a complete boo-boo here. Because I wanted to change this to prod ord. Prod ord dollar. I wanted to do this here. ORD. Dollar. R dot. I've got to find something to do as an update. Let's update the status. Can I update the status? I don't know what. Yeah.
Just use qt.com, is the qt.com instead to add, if you want to add a value, qt.com.
Qt. That one, com. Okay.
Yeah.
That one.
This is the,
and I can do a plus equal
quantity order.
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, this is
okay. Just as an example. Are you comfortable, by the way, with this plus equal?
Yeah.
You are. Okay. And then, of course, okay. And this would be prod ORD dollar. Update prod ORD B. Right, so that is the take that out because I don't need it. I just want to go into the IO server, which will then take me into the trigger because I want you guys to see what's going to happen on the way through. So I'm going to take all of that lot out just to clean it up. Are you happy with that? So let's compile this program. Here we are. Now I will start the debug again now that I've remembered what I had to do. And I will call that program once more. And we're back in the debug. With all this comms going on, it takes a while. Right. So we start commitment control. Good enough. I'm rushing. I'm not thinking. I apologize. Of course, it won't go in there because I want this, which is in the something routine. I want it moved into there because that's the main line. So we'll compile it again. Good. Start the debug again. Please forgive me. It's late in my afternoon. Right. We do again. Takes a while to get into this thing. Right, there we are. Right. We do the start commitment control because it's a new activation group. Can you spot the error? Anybody? I haven't got any record, have I? So that's not going to work either. Oh, I'll do that again because it actually did something rather nice. That I'm going to call it, and it goes through here, and it will attempt to do an update on that record. And if I terminate it, which means like that, look what I get on the screen. That's a system error, which is percolated back from the IO server. Oh, it's my iOS 3000. That is my message from the IO server, which says the record you're trying to update was not found. Would you like to see that in debug?
Yeah, but you must do a read before to do an update.
I know. But
normally
so
it's like that.
I didn't do a read before, so
Yeah,
I messed
you need
it
to
up.
chain or read first.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that again. Let's just kill that thing. Kill the debug. Oh. Right. Let's just. Copy. I'm just going to do a read forward, i.e. I'm going to read the first record off the file. Okay. Not a problem, not going to be terribly fancy. It's just going to read the first record off that file, which I know is there. So I don't have to have a problem. Right, let's start all over again. Let's start the debug again. Hit the enter key. Right, we're back in business again. Now read forward. Now I can look at the record. Look at this record here. You can see it has a value of 700 in it. That field.
That's
There's a
an
value
old
of
order.
Yeah. So if I step one down, it should change its value to 701, and it does. Whoa. Now I'm going to step into the IO server. I'm going to step into the IO server, and the IO server, it's already been called, so it didn't open it again because we're in the same activation group. It moves the record into the key, i.e. my key has got 4406. And it's an update, so I go to the update. The update routine says chain using that key. That key is only one key in the file, so that's fine. I chain and I put the chained record into save rec. So I can look here at save rec, and I now have in save rec, I've got that file, and QTCOM is 700. Okay. Now, it was found, so I'm going to do an update on the record. The record, just as a matter of interest, has QTCOM equals 701. So at this moment, I have both the old record in SaveRec and I've got the new record in there. So now I'm going to step into the update, because this is the way you get into the trigger, is you step into the IO action. Whatever you like to do, you step into it with the debug, and it will bring up the trigger. There it is there. It pops up the trigger because it's now stepped into the trigger, and the pointer is right at the top. So we have to step down one to see where it gets in. And it gets there. All right. Now, this is what I wanted to show you, is this is the mechanics of how the trigger programs work. I have come from that update statement there into this trigger program here via the RDBMS. So I go down, I reset the error, I take PP and I set it to be equal to the address of P. Right, so I've done that. I'm going back up here, and because this is based on PP, I can see this is the parameter list that I was given. This is the parameter list that I received from the database management system. File name, library, member, event 3 is an update. Time is a before 2. Commitment lock, yes, it is under commitment control. That's a notification to the trigger that this file is under commitment control. The CCS ID is 37. The relative record number is 1. It's the first record on the file. The old offset is 96. The old length is 137. The new offset is 288. The new length is 137. So I've been given the offset for both the old and the new record. Okay. So I'm going to step down and I'm going to set the new point. Look at the offset there. The new offset is 288. I'm going to step down and I'm going to make the new pointer equal to the PP plus that offset. Now, at this point, N is looking at the new record. This is the new record. And I can tell it's the new record because QTCOM has 701 in it. Where do you think, just offer me an opinion as to where do you think this actual record is? Where is the definition? Because remember, this N is based on a pointer. Where is the pointer pointing to?
Pointer is pointing into into memory.
It's pointing into the database management system, actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Because
somewhere in the space.
both records, the database management system received your new record from the program, went and recovered the existing record, and both of them are sitting inside the database management system. That pointer overlays the space inside the database management system. So it doesn't cost you space in the program. It's already reserved. Now let's move down one more. Step down again. We're going to add the old offset to the old point to make the old pointer. And here we look at the old record. You will see the old record has UTCOM as 700. So can you see that I have both records before and after the update available to me in this trigger? Now, because you've got both records, you can compare a record old to new. For example, if you have a price and your company policy says no price increase should be more than 12%. That's a company policy, okay? You can put that into the trigger of your pricing file, because you can take the old price and the new price. You can calculate how much percentage the increase is, and you could say, this is an invalid increase. You've tried to increase the price by more than 12%. So you can compare and work with values from both the old and the new records to validate things like that. A commission, sales commission, not allowed to be more than 5% of the guy's salary. You can do that sort of thing. So just remember, in a trigger, you actually have access to both records, the before and the after image on an update. Okay. Let's have a look. The null byte maps we're not talking about at the moment. Now, the event is a 3 rather. So we're going into the update. We step into the update, and here we have the first thing in the update, which says, make sure the new number is the same as the old number. No argument about it. I could put an if it's different, change it, but why? It just makes it longer. Then I would go into the validate routine. So we step into the validate and we start going through this. Now, this is going to create total chaos, because if I step into the record code, if I step into the no-com, there's the test that says if it's 0, it is an error, because it shouldn't be 0. So that's the test. It's not 0, so we go out of that. We can go through that without a problem. And then we get back to this point. And here we can step into this one. And let's see, what is this? CD act. It's an A. So this one says if it's a space, it's an error. So that's also okay. I'm trying to find one that actually breaks. This one, according to my validation, remember this is an automatically generated validation. This says there's an error. So it switches on the error indicator and it sends a diagnostic message to the database management system. That's what it's doing. It's sending it one up the call stack by default, which is the database management system. And then it goes NDIF. Now, I don't know how many of these things are going to, but I'm going to step through all of these. I'm not going to These may be sending back diagnostics, they may be not, but I'm going to show you what happens. When I get to the end of this procedure, I will go back to the end of the update procedure, and I will go back to the end of the main line. This is the main line here. And I will check, have I received any error whatsoever? And in this case, I know the answer is yes. There may be more, but I can see. Now, what I'm going to do just for fun, I'm going to escape this, and I'm going to look at the job log. Yeah, there were a few errors. Contains invalid values, most of them, which is not surprising, seeing they were defaults, and I don't allow defaults. So there's a list of the errors that the trigger has trapped, and they've gone into the job log. They're sitting in the job log. If I do an F1 and an F9, you can see they were sent to program B0 from the error handler. They were sent to program B0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going back to where I was, and if error, it says if there was an error, and there was an error, I'm going to do an error handler 05. Now 05 is the error handler that does it moves the diagnostics and the escape messages. So all diagnostics and escape messages are moved. What this is important is about this is if there is an escape message in that stack, it gets converted to a diagnostic. So this moves everything up one level in the call stack as diagnostics. Okay. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to execute that ERH05. Now I'm going back to this program. I'm going to have a look at that job log again. And there are the same messages in the job log, but I want you to notice one very big difference. Oh, no, not a very big difference. Why did they do that? To program, it's still showing that program. It hasn't moved it yet. Sorry. And then here it's sending the error handler 11, which is the trigger 901. So I'm going to, and because this is an escape message, this trigger program will end here. It won't do any more. It will send the escape message and it will return to the IO server. And you can see it's done exactly that. It's returned to the IO server with an on-error condition, i.e. it's jumped from that update, which it was doing. It has not done a return. It has jumped straight there. And it's going to execute ERH03, which moves the diagnostics and resends the escape message. So that will be a sending of an escape message. So that will immediately take me back to the this procedure in the IO server, which is the main line of the IO server, into the on-error condition again. Even though it came from here, it's jumped to there. Again, it will do an 03, which is moving the diagnostics and resending the escape message, which will terminate this program and take me straight back to the calling program, which is there. And this calling program is in an on-error condition. It will take me back. It will resend move the diagnostics and resend the escape message again, and that will end that program. And by default, those messages will pitch up on the screen. There you can see the one error, which is the trigger 9010. Errors found in trigger program. See job log for details. F10, display the messages in the job log. And you can see all the error messages in the job log. So the diagnostics appear in the job log. You can read them out of the job log because it's in a message queue if you want your application program to do something with them, or you can just leave them, because here as a screen, I can scroll them. Okay, I can only scroll the latest two. An error was found in a trigger program. But that is, the diagnostics themselves are in the job log and can be retrieved and displayed on the screen or wherever you want to do with them. Okay. So
do you have an example?
Sorry.
Do you have an example of a program that can read the message from the job log?
Yes.
Could you give us an example?
There's actually hang on. There's an API that you can use. I've got. Oi, you. Diane, you jumped that on me very quickly, and I'm now trying furiously to think where that program is. There is an API that allows you to read messages out of the message queue. Remember, it's actually the job log at this point in time is not the job log. Well, it is now because the job log has ended, but up until the point where the job ends, before then, it's all part of the message queues. So you by reading the message queues, you are reading the job log. Okay. The message queues turn into the job log when the job ends. That's an important thing. So the error handlers, the API, let me see if I can find it. The API, I'm just looking for the documentation. Oh, why is this not giving me what I want? Oh, there it is. Programs, definitely. Sorry, I'm just trying to get my bearings here. So the RPGID reference. definitions. I've got the wrong manual up here. There's the program. Okay. It's the reference manual I wanted. I got the wrong one. Sorry. No, that's not that either. I'm actually fumbling around in the dark. Let me do this properly. While I'm doing this, I'm trying to think of what program I've got that actually reads them. One of the error handlers actually allows you to read the messages out of the message queue.
If you don't do that usually, how can you validate the data and return to the application and be able to put color on the fields that were not right for the insert or the update?
Okay. That's actually quite a difficult question to answer, and I'll tell you why. While I'm looking for this thing, I do my interface, my user interface is done with using a product called UIM, which is the User Interface Manager. And the User Interface Manager does exactly what this interface does because this here that you're looking at now, is actually a User Interface Manager interface, which means that automatically if you send back messages, they automatically get displayed on this message line. Now, a display file has the same functionality. I haven't written a display file for hundreds of years, but I know you can read messages out of the message queue and display them on the bottom of the screen. You might have to identify the messages, i.e. read them one at a time so that you know what the error is, so that you can then highlight the fields that you want to show the errors for. But that's why the error message actually provides the name of the field, so that you don't need to do that. That's what I have done mostly, is that I put the name out there so I don't have to go and highlight the fields for.
We do have a fancy user. They prefer that we show them by with color what's wrong. They don't look at the message.
You need to start training your users, I think. Sorry. I understand what you're saying, because this is actually not an unusual problem. Going to worry about this. Let me just calm down and think about what I'm looking for. I know I was looking for something. Right. Now it'll come up. I understand that your users want to have a nice highlight, but then do they know you don't give them the message to say what's wrong, you just tell them it's wrong. and they've got to guess another thing to guess it right. Is that what you're saying to me? Because it would be better in the message to say this is an invalid value. The value should be XYZ or whatever it should be like, just to help them out. And remember that the error message has two levels.
They have both. They have the color on the screen,
okay.
and they do have the message, but they don't look at the message. When they see color, oh, it's something wrong. That yeah. I do remember. I must written that thing.
Okay. So you've got that particular problem. Okay, I understand. In that case, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to tailor your messages a lot more carefully. And I'm just looking, I'm waiting for this thing to load. It takes forever because there we are. I think it's in this. Let me see if it's here. In my error handler, yeah. 4. Error handler 4. This error handler is designed to receive the last message out of the message queue. You see, it's an API called SRVPGM, and message length receive, and it says last. So it's receiving the last message out of the message queue. And then it returns the message ID in the return parameter. So this is a function. So you would use this API and then you would cycle it to read the next one up, the next one up, the next one up, because you can read and remove the record from the job queue or the message queue. You can read it and remove it. So you can read backwards up the message queue. So yes, it's possible. The problem I have is you would have to customize something in the message to indicate which field it was. So I presume you might want to, instead of using that description, maybe you would want to use why is that? Instead of using this, which is the description of the field, you may want to use the data name in the file, for example, the short name, so that your program can know which field it is, that you will then put a reverse image or colored indicator onto it. Because you can retrieve, this is substitution data in the message, and you can receive that substitution data, so you can actually identify what field the message refers to. Yes, you can. Yes, Joel.
Last year I did some testing, and what I did to solve a Diane problem is write the field in a user space. Then the program read all the field in the user space.
Joel, my next subject is user spaces. You're already there. You could do that. It's an extra step, but your trigger program would then have to write the user space, which your program would have to read. Oh, that's a lovely question for next time, because the next time we're going to talk about user spaces, and I'm going to show you how to use user spaces to communicate between the trigger program and your application program.
Okay.
How's that?
Fine.
And that's exactly at 5:30. How's that? You couldn't have picked a better moment to ask that question. So yes, there are numerous ways of doing it. You can read the messages, you can use a user space. It all depends on the needs of your interface. And quite honestly, when we get to the end of this thing where we start talking about the JSON payload and how you handle the JSON payload, then you will see that one of the things that the JSON driver program does, if it receives an error message, it will read all the error messages from the message queue and will send all the error messages down the JSON payload to the client in the front end, the graphical client in the front end. So yes, we do that with the JSON payload because it's not automatic like it is here on this interface. I also have the same problem. Sometimes I want to highlight fields. I got to find out which field I got to highlight. I understand where the problem is. You really should tell the users not to expect so much. Read the message.
Tommy, by the laughs, it sounds like all of us have been confronted with that problem for decades.
The same problem happens to all of us, yeah. It's the programmer's nightmare. All right. That takes us to the end of the review of the trigger code. I would love you, before next week, to try and create a trigger for that prod file and to devise some validations and some error messages. You're going to have to change your template to ERR instead of ERH. And then you're going to have to design some messages in your error message file. I think you're actually using my error message file, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, you are. There's mine. This is the AO error message file. Am I right?
Yeah.
Tell you straight away. These are all my messages. You're more than welcome to use them. Make sure you just keep them away from the AO database, otherwise they will change maybe every time we issue a new release, and you may not like me after that. So make sure if you're going to take stuff out of it, make it your own and move it into one of your own spaces. Okay. But
Tommy, didn't you have a tool for message file?
yes, I did. Oh dear, you've got it as well. Strangely enough.
Yeah, I know that we have it, but I didn't see it.
It's here. Work with message files.
Okay. This is great.
Now, you have to add a new one. So we would say ERRMSGF is in ABC underbar train. And you could give it ABC, whatever you like to call it. Now, it's there. You can open it.
What's our message file, Diane, is Q. Where is it?
User message. USERMSG.
USERMSG. And where can I find it?
Belopers. 6 en français? BILOPRSYS.
Yes.
SYS or IS?
Yeah, like that.
That's it.
I
Like
guess.
that. Okay. Right, there it is there. You can open
And
it.
we also have another
English
one
one.
for English version is
Yeah.
user message E.
Ah, okay, we'll put that one in as well.
We have both French and English. That's user message with an A. A like Apple. Yeah. At the end. A. Yeah.
EA.
A.
No,
A.
no,
Only
E, just a A.
Just
A.
the A.
A.
That
Yeah.
one. Same place.
Same place.
BILOPRSYS. It may not be blank. English.
Yeah. English.
English.
Right.
Quite an afternoon.
Open it. You can see the messages. No, you can't because there's nothing in there. What you have to do before you can use the messages is you need to import them. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What it does is because these are two files in the AO database, and I'm importing them. So I will just import them. I'm not going to. It's quick. Now I can see your messages. Okay. And I'm looking at the English ones because then I understand them better. The reason I wrote this little app, it was really, I got so tired of having duplicate messages in my message files because one person needed a message and another person needed a message and they put the same message in with different numbers and it became an irritation. And there is nowhere in the IBM I user commands that you can select messages by text. So I wrote this specifically for be able to filter by text.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
Now those have all got invalid in the text. Okay, so now this operates, this file is independent of the message file that you have on your system. Please understand that. It's independent of the message file that you have on your system. It's in the database. I mean, for example, I can pick up anything that's got a warning in it. To me, that was the reason for this whole exercise. But if you add messages or change messages in this file, you have to export them back to the right message file in the right target system. That's updating the message file in the actual message file. All right. Please don't forget that because otherwise it will create chaos for you. The other thing that you can do here is I'm just going to open this message file. You can change it, copy it, delete it, or you can define variables for it. So you can create a variable, type character 10, and you can put a character 10 variable on it, and it will update variables. Now I'm looking at your messages, and I'm pretty certain that you're not into really using variables.
Yes.
Yes, we
Those
are.
one are first. The one you're looking are the first one we've done.
Okay.
But if you roll, you'll see that we do have some.
Okay, no, that's fine. Variables I find very useful because you can customize one single message to mean a lot of things. But you can define them here. You can maintain them here. You just must export them back to the file that they belong in. Otherwise, they won't show up in your system. Okay. So that is a little extra that you get out of AO. It's not a very classy app because it really was written to help me, and I just decided to throw it into the menu because I thought it might help others, and it does, I'm sure. Searching by text is is greatly useful. Okay. Two things. Please write me a trigger on your prod. See whether you can get it to work. And then give some thought to what I've said about triggers, because I need any questions that you have. I need for you to see them, because what we are going to do next is we are going to pull the trigger again, but this time without shooting yourself in the foot. This will mean that we are trying to design a trigger that will allow you to use it on a file, but to avoid crashing programs that are not trigger ready, but work properly for programs that are trigger ready. Okay. You understand what I'm saying? It's the question, Bernard, you asked me earlier, right at the beginning. How can we use triggers without breaking my database? Okay. That's next Thursday. So you got a whole week to think about it.
All right.
All right. Thank you, guys. I hope it's been useful. And we'll talk next week. But please, if you have any questions, email me.
Thank you, Tommy.
Or keep a list of questions so that we can deal with them next week. Okay.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you,
Enjoy,
Tommy.
enjoy your day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.